Hello, everyone. I'm Major Garrett in Washington. Welcome to The Take-Up. President Trump takes great pride in refusing to discuss military actions before they happen or even hinting what might be coming. But not today. The president this afternoon said an Israeli assault on Iranian nuclear facilities could very well happen, and there is a chance of massive conflict in the Middle East. Those are quotes. The president also said he gave the order advising U.S. embassy personnel and military family members that it is okay and possibly advisable to leave Iraq and other parts of the region, saying that advice could well save lives. CBS News reporting confirms Israel is not only contemplating a military attack on Iran, that's been true for months, if not years, but importantly, is moving closer than ever to a launch decision. CBS News also reports, the U.S. is unlikely to participate, a decision that could isolate Israel and undercut the effectiveness of any military mission to locate and disable Iranian nuclear facilities, some of which are buried deep underground. Israel, according to CBS News reporting, believes Iran is particularly vulnerable now, having lost regional clout in Syria, Lebanon, and Gaza. Now, this could all be positioning and posturing. We know that more U.S. talks with Iran about the future of its nuclear program are scheduled for this weekend. We begin tonight with Eleanor Watson at the Pentagon. Eleanor's friends call her Ellie, and she's a friend of the show. So, Ellie, please tell us what your reporting is on this ever-evolving topic and region.
So U.S. officials have told CBS that Israel is all set to launch strikes against Iranian nuclear sites and has been for a few weeks. Over the past year, Iran's proxies like Hamas and Hezbollah have been decimated, and Iran itself has suffered hits to its own air defenses in retaliation for missiles it launched at Israel. So from Israel's perspective, there is no better time than the present to try and do some severe damage to Iran's nuclear program. President Trump has said today that he prefers diplomacy to prevent Iran from getting a nuclear weapon. He said that any strike while negotiations are ongoing could blow up any chance of a deal. And as you mentioned, negotiations as of now are expected to continue, with Special Envoy Steve Witkoff headed to Oman for the 6th round of talks with Iran. But the U.S. did advise some personnel to leave the Middle East yesterday in case Israel decides to go at this alone.
And Ellie, what is the sense there at the Pentagon about U.S. either involvement or getting a heads up about whatever Israel might or might not do?
The sense right now is the U.S. does not want to participate in this strike, that Israel, if it goes, could very well go alone. But what the U.S. is concerned about is what retaliation would look like and whether or not Iran follows through on its promise to, if Iran talks fail, if Iran is attacked, then Iran has threatened to target U.S. bases. There are still 3,000 troops in Iraq, 1,000 troops in Syria still fighting ISIS, and particularly the troops in Iraq could be vulnerable because they not only face the threat of Iranian-backed militias just across the fence line, but also because ballistic missiles fired from Iran are just a few minutes' flight away.
Very quickly, Ellie, is there any sense within the United States national security apparatus how effective or ineffective an Israel military assault in Iran might be?
So, former and current officials will tell you that without the bunker buster bombs that the U.S. has, and only the U.S. has, that Iran's nuclear program won't be completely destroyed because the nuclear enrichment sites are heavily fortified, deeply underground. It needs penetrative bunker buster bombs to fully go at them. But Israel, if it takes this chance alone, may risk not destroying the entire program, but setting it back enough so that it's not worth it to continue.
Eleanor, we call her Ellie Watson at the Pentagon. Brilliant stuff. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I want to bring in Weijia Jiang now, who joins us from the North Lawn of the White House. Weijia, the president was talkative about this in a way that I'm unaccustomed to seeing, talking about risks, the idea that Iran needs to get into the negotiating table more seriously, make more concessions, evaluate the day.
Major, you're right in that he spoke actually at length about this, taking several questions during an unrelated event here at the White House. But what he did not offer was any specificity. in terms of when there could be an Israeli attack on Iran. He said he did not want to use the word imminent, but said it is something that could happen. And of course, oftentimes actions speak louder than words. And we know that the U.S. has been working to evaluate Americans in the region, to send the message to get out of areas that could be vulnerable. And when asked why, again, the president did not offer details, but he said because it could be dangerous. So even though he's talking around it, he is acknowledging that it is a real possibility that there is an attack on Iran by Israel. And Ellie makes a very important point, Major, that even if the IDF goes at this operation alone, that doesn't mean that the U.S. could not eventually be dragged in if the conflict broadens and if U.S. facilities and forces are involved, which is exactly why the president says he does not want there to be conflict. He is expressing optimism that the U.S. can still broker a nuclear deal with Iran. He says the bottom line, Major, is that they cannot have a nuclear weapon. And we know that his trusted advisor and Middle East envoy, Steve Witkoff, is set for a 6th round of talks with Tehran on Sunday. So it really matters what happens during that conversation, Major, because today the president said, I hope Israel does not attack as long as there is a chance that that deal could still come to fruition.
And Weijia, this conversation we're having is not in isolation because there was an important announcement and action taken by the UN watchdog agency on nuclear proliferation, International Atomic Energy Agency, the IAEA, which said that Iran, according to its inspectors, had been hiding enrichment of nuclear materials and sanctioned Iran for those violations today. This has quite definitely caught the attention of Benjamin Netanyahu and the entire Israeli government.
Absolutely, Major. And you bring up such a critical point because it wasn't that long ago, just weeks ago, that the White House was very clear that the red line for any agreement with Iran has to be that there is zero enrichment of uranium. And that is, what is needed to ultimately create a nuclear weapon, high levels of enrichment of uranium. And there was reporting that we are still trying to pin down that the administration might be open to altering that from 0% to low levels to allow Iran to enrich that for civilian use. But to your point, Major, that watchdog says that they already are working toward enriching it in high levels. And that begs the question whether they are actually serious about sitting down with the U.S. and coming to an agreement when the White House has made so abundantly clear that that is where they have to draw the line. Now, whether that line has moved, that is a really important question, Major, that the president did not answer today.
And Weijia, I just want to explore that question that hangs in the air because it may not be answerable, but when the Obama administration, which I covered, tried to wrestle this, it said, well, if there is regular and frequent inspections of Iranian nuclear facilities and the international community can be certain that the nuclear program is for civilian power generation and cannot be amplified, that's a general term, in the direction of a nuclear weapon, that's something that the international community, including the United States, could live with. Is it knowable if the Trump administration could live with that as well?
Well, Major, you also know what happened when the president came in during office during his first time, and he pulled out of that agreement you're talking about, the JCPOA, because he did not think that was, acceptable, and he wanted more. And he has made so clear, Major, that that is where he stands on this. However, it's worth noting today that he kept saying that for him, what's important is that they're never able to develop a nuclear weapon. Again, we're talking at that point about those high levels of enrichment. We really need to get an answer, Major, from President Trump about whether he has moved that goalpost and whether he is willing to accept what you just laid out there under the Obama administration.
Excellent reporting, as always, from Weijia Jiang in the North Lawn of the White House. Thanks so much. I'm going to move over to the conversation corner, which I have the desire to do sometimes, especially when I have a great guest who's going to amplify our conversation even more. Ben Jensen joins me now. He is with the Center for Strategic and International Studies, a friend of the show. Thanks for coming back.
Great to see you.
So glad you are here. Help my audience understand how this week has sort of accelerated. And now we're talking, the President of the United States is talking ways he typically doesn't about something that could happen. And the phrase they use at the Pentagon all the time is kinetic strike, Israel, Iran.
So first, to say this situation is explosive is an understatement. Iran and Israel are standing on a powder keg, dipped in gasoline at a redneck picnic with fireworks going off. And to say why that is...
I get the picture.
Yeah, one cigarette, boom. And it's scary, you're right. The president is trying to publicly signal, so this goes back to a long literature on deterrence and coercion. He is using his kind of position to publicly signal restraint. Israel's not listening. And what's scarier than what happened about roughly a year ago, so April 13th, 2024, Iran launched Operation True Promise. 170 drones, 30 cruise missiles, 120 ballistic missiles that Israel, the U.S., and other allies shot down and stopped a broader escalation. Israel responded with limited strikes. This will not be limited this time. Iran has to hit harder to show that it can. And Israel, if it wants to take out Iran's nuclear infrastructure, is going to have to hit those ballistic missiles, is going to have to hit intelligence facilities. It's probably going to have to target Iranian leadership. So it's very hard to see a world in which we don't step very close to the abyss in the next 7 days.
Can Israel accomplish that without the United States?
That's the big question. So one thing we do know is do not underestimate Israel's ability to conduct complex covert operations matched with long-range precision strikes. So everything from the wild stuff with the pagers and the radios to their ability without us to launch precision strikes that actually took out Iran's most advanced air defense systems 5 days after that True Promise attack back in April. So I think Israel actually could. The question is how long can they keep it up? And that's where they need the U.S. to provide the intelligence, to provide the weapons. And that's the hard political question for our president if this goes forward.
What are the facilities that Israel would be most likely to attack, and what are the hardest to get to?
Yeah, great question. I think they have a couple different strike packages. If you and I were planning with them, here would be our debate. One is, hey, do I use shock and surprise and instantly hit the nuclear facilities? Try to crater them and limit the escalation. So I only hit nuclear infrastructure. I don't actually hit the leadership. I don't hit the military. The other package, which is actually similar to our debate in the Cuban Missile Crisis, when you go look at the historical files, is actually before I hit the nuclear facilities, I have to hit their air defenses, and I have to hit the ballistic missiles that Iran would use to fire at Israeli cities. There's no way, as good as Israel's air defenses are, they could intercept 1,000 ballistic missiles fired within a 48-hour period. So that's going to be the big planning debate going for the Israelis. Shock and surprise, hit the nuclear facilities and see if Iran retaliates, or actually conduct a multi-day, if not multi-month air campaign that rolls back Iranian missiles, air defenses, and then the nuclear facilities.
Back to your very vivid, and appropriately so, vivid metaphor at the top. Is there a way in which this conversation is trying to redirect Iran and say, look, yeah, you're on this powder keg, but there's a little garden over here where you can sit, trade with the United States, you can have a civilian nuclear program, maybe, maybe not, but you can't have the bomb?
Yeah, I think you saw our president actually tease that, right? Sometimes
that's what I was hearing.
I heard it too. Sometimes the president will almost use this way where he says one thing and then he makes a conditional claim on the other side. That's what I heard him say. It's like, well, this could lead us to a huge war, but it could also pressure the negotiations. And so it's clear that our president, Trump, has actually signaled to the Israelis he doesn't want them to strike right now. The CENTCOM commander Kurilla just canceled his visit. We're pulling our diplomats' families out. So I think you see a actually more sophisticated signaling game going on in Washington than they're getting credit for right now. Now, is it enough? I don't know. What I do know is the president is right to call for some restraint here and hopefully walk us back, because there's no telling once this starts how far it goes.
You well remember, Ben, reading the history of the Vietnam War, that one of the things that Richard Nixon, as president, tried to convince the North Vietnamese is he was a crazy man who might just do anything. Yeah. In this scenario, I wonder if in this particular approach that President Trump has just taken today and this signaling, he's telling the Iranians, the crazy person is Netanyahu. I'm not as crazy as he is, so you better deal with me.
Yeah. I mean, this is where you get to some really interesting, complex negotiations that you're right. What's the old James Brown line? I don't know karate. I know Karazer. I'm so nuts you don't know what I'm going to do. And definitely showing that you are the rational actor in the room, which isn't normally our president's strategy in these negotiations, could open something up. But Iran's already signaling they'll target U.S. bases, even though we're offering the olive branch. They're already publicly saying they'll make new enrichment facilities. So there is a darker current coming out of their signaling, which, careful, because someone's going to have to now hit them on it. And I think the Israelis they've been ready to go for months.
It's a conversation corner, but we also learn a great deal here, especially when you're in the conversation corner.
Always happy to see you.
Thanks so much. I appreciate it. Thank you very much.